Oh, good. My credentials are I have a master's degree in creative writing from the Hollins University Creative Writing Program, a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Florida. I've been a paid journalist since I was 18 years old. I'm not going to say how long that's been, but since 1976 I've been writing for newspapers and magazines. And I wrote the speeches in 1992 for Jerry Brown, and in 1996 and the year 2000 for Ralph Nader. And in the case of Ralph Nader, I was also campaign manager and chairman of the Green Party for North Carolina.
And then what is your political?
Greens.
Okay.
So if you ask why didn't I vote for Obama, I voted for Jill Stein. Who wouldn't?
Okay, if there's so many allegations against the president, how are the voters that voted for him not once but twice? Is this just because he is black and did not allow Ms. Clinton to sit on that White House?
Well, of course, he had Clinton as Secretary of State, which is a pretty high pedestal. She retired to get ready for her presidential run, I'm just guessing. But I think that it's not just because he's African American. Only 12% of the United States is African American. I think he won re-election because people feel the Republican Party would be worse, and they may be right in that, but that's like comparison. It's a bad comparison. And let's not forget, George Bush Jr. also won re-election, and he had created torture. He had created an unnecessary war. I mean, it's hard to get worse than George Bush Jr. The torture was proven by photographs, and he got re-elected 2 years after the torture. Obama's better than that, I guess.
Okay, so how can people help America stop sleeping?
Locally. Any green will tell you that the only way to solve problems is locally. Pollution is always local. So the Greens are big on the environment, and you cannot really solve those problems at a national level, especially in the United States. But if you want to live a life outside globalization, and my blog's got a piece on that, you have to do it locally. You have to grow a local team. You have to say, okay, I'm not going to buy any more globalized clothes. I have enough clothes, even if they're too small. I have enough of what I need, and then I'll do as much as I can to not feed that system. Perfect example, Shin Jong-gu. Dr. Shin rides a bicycle to last his whole life. And so he does, as far as I know, as little as anyone to feed into globalization. You can do that. It's inconvenient. I don't own a car here, at least, but I admit to taking the bus. So it has to be done locally. You can try to change everything like the Occupy movement did or the protest in Spain and Greece. You're not going to change the top. You're not going to change the guys who own everything. So you have to just not play their game and not pay their taxes and be brave. Okay.
Should the enforcement of the minimum wage policy be a priority rather than immigration control?
Yes. A worldwide minimum wage would usurp the need for immigration control in the United States or in South Korea. In South Korea, a number of people, I won't say Vietnam, China, and Philippines, but a number of people come without papers, and they stay, and they work hard for low wages. And in the U.S., there's way more so, maybe 1 million Mexicans a year come in. If you have a worldwide minimum wage, guess what? That includes Mexico. And maybe they'd rather stay home with mom and the kids and the family if they were making $10 an hour. Rather than, I guess about $3 an hour is average in Mexico. That's pretty good, actually.
How about Korea?
How about Korea? Well, $10 an hour. The minimum wage here is $5.50.
$5.1.
Huh? Five?
$5.1.
Yeah, okay, $55.10. Yeah, $10 everywhere. And everyone will say, oh, what about inflation? Well, too bad. I mean, China works because part of the 52 cents an hour they make is supplemented by super cheap food and super cheap rent. So the government actually helps to pay their wages so that the overseas guys can make a bigger profit, and so there's no revolution. Although there are 42 cities that have blown up in the last 2 years in China. We don't hear a lot about that. So Minimum wage could also include super, like the way China does, super cheap food and housing. That's a way of making a minimum wage.
So could these failures be attributed to change in the global affairs rather than the Obama administration?
Yes. The Obama administration is just the sixth stepchild of Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan, who accomplished to his great amazement and mine, the lowering of the wall in Berlin and the breaking up of the Soviet Union, what he then set about to do, and then the Bush guys and Clinton and everyone else did even more, was to create this new world order that they were talking about. And the new world order is now called the World Trade Organization. And it means that one super group here, like I said, their rules are more important than sovereignty. The U.S. pays $400 million a year to France because we continue to subsidize our dairy farmers. That's just in the dairy section. And farm subsidies in the U.S. and Europe have basically starved Africa. Africa, maybe India too. And you know about the suicides from the GMOs in Africa? No, we're not going to go there. But I could talk to you about genetically modified organisms and the dastardly deeds of Monsanto, but I won't. Anyway, what was the question?
I have this one.
That one. That's very good. Yeah, it's not Obama's fault. He's just kind of in there. He said he was going to change things, but I was worried from the get-go, and now he's proven that he can't. You could say, well, it's because the Republicans are so staunch and they won't let him do anything, and that's true. You could say a lot of other things, but at least I was hoping for more of an effort from Mr. Obama. But world trade and globalization and really cheap labor is with us now. All the money being sucked up to the rich, and the middle class is disappearing. Look, 14 cents, 52 cents an hour will not create a middle class, on one hand. But it will suck the middle class from Europe and the US and move it all to a lower class, while the Americans and Spanish and everyone, many others look for work.
Okay, rumor says that the FED controls the U.S. economics. Can you explain the FED?
The Fed is the Federal Reserve Bank. Of course, that's not a rumor. The Federal Reserve Bank sets the interest rate, which has been at zero for a long time. And they took that, or they should have learned from Japan. Japan had 0% interest rate for 15 years, and the economy just kept sinking. So if you're lending money to the banks for free, and the economy still is sinking, you're in trouble. The Fed does, in fact, control the economy. If they don't like the president, they can create whopper inflation, like they did for Jimmy Carter. Oh, the Fed nailed Jimmy Carter right, bam, with a baseball bat. They knocked him out. So, yes, the Fed does, but at 0% and $17 trillion that we owe, the Fed is losing its ability to actually shape how we pay money back and whether our economy is good or not. With a 0% interest rate, there should be millions and millions of jobs created every week because money's free, and it's not being made. And so the Federal Reserve's ability to do that is slowly going, their clout is going away. They, one more thing, they have had $850 million into the U.S. Wall Street, the U.S. stock market, since 2009. Okay, that's $850 million a week. Call it $100 million a day, straight into the U.S. stock market, and yet it's not really going up or down much. Why? Because foreigners are pulling out of the New York Stock Exchange at a rate that's more than $100 million a day. $100 million a day is not enough to keep the U.S. stock market alive much longer. Because the lady that took over after Bernanke is saying, I'm not going to give you that money anymore. Oh man, that could be the cliff that we've all been needing to think about. $100 million.
What do you think is the rationale for the U.S. not allowing the peace agreement?
Which peace agreement?
It says the Korean Peninsula is technically at war.
Oh yes, of course, we're technically at war and we're in a ceasefire. And it's the U.S.'s fault that there's never been a peace treaty? Oh, I don't know about that. It's possible. We do have military bases here. I think there's an intractable situation between governments. And if Korea were reunified, that would be great, but how would the North Koreans be treated here? I'm not sure. There's evidence to say maybe not so great. However, if it was unified, North Koreans would do what? Move south. That could create an economic problem for South Korea. Not enough jobs. And then there could be what would be a gold rush to buy North Korean land by wealthy South Koreans. And nothing would change except instead of $30,000 a year, it might drop to 25 or 20 or 15 or 10. I hope it happens, but it's tricky, and that's putting it mildly. Mark my support from cabinet, and not as a dictator. Why president not being credited by eliminating terrorists? Oh, I give Barack Obama full and total credit, success number 4, for the death of Osama bin Laden. However, he had been dying of liver cancer for years before he was killed, and he was picked as the enemy because he was already a well-known name. Let's read a book called House of Bush, House of Saud by Craig Unger, who is a Pulitzer Prize winner, New York Times journalist. He will explain the 40-year history of the Bush family and the House of Saud marriage, and the fact that Osama bin Laden is in fact first cousin to the king of Saudi Arabia before he died. Many times they had Osama bin Laden in their sights. This is open record. And many times Bush got in there and said, you can't kill him because there's a Saudi prince there. Sure there is. Osama bin Laden was the Saudi prince. So Bush could have gotten him and didn't. Why? Because that continues the war. The longer the war lasts, ask Vietnam. The longer the war lasts, the better for the guys who make a profit on war. The U.S.'s biggest export is war. Anyone want to doubt that? No. That's one of the reasons why it took a long time to get him. I give Barack Obama full credit for that. But then why didn't he pull our troops home like he keeps saying he's going to do? Why did he take them from Iraq and move them to Pakistan? Oh yeah, the oil pipeline wasn't done. Oh yeah.
Please feel free to ask any questions after. So, another round of applause.